The galaxy was wide, filled with countless stars, and every star carried its own stories of life, struggle, and hope. Yet there were rare moments when thousands of voices from across different systems came together under a single roof. The Galactic Union had declared such a moment would arrive on the orbiting station of Valari Prime, a shining monument of glass, steel, and radiant energy rings floating peacefully above a bright blue star. Valari Prime was not only an engineering marvel but also a symbol. It had been constructed by workers from many species, humans included, though humans were still very new to this grand stage. The station had gardens that floated in spheres of water, endless halls that carried soft glowing light, and views of space so clear that every visitor felt they were standing in the heavens. It was here that the wedding between the royal house of the Vora and the High Council of the Terran would take place, a union that was not about love alone, but about peace. For centuries, the Vora and the Terran had been rivals, their fleets often meeting at the edge of disputed borders. Blood had been spilled, and grudges had burned across generations. Yet now, at last, both houses had agreed to join in marriage to show unity and hope for a shared future. Delegates from more than 50 systems were invited. Some came in glowing ships shaped like crystals, others in massive carriers that looked more like floating mountains than starcraft. The hall where the wedding would be held was arranged with rows upon rows of banners representing each race. The air carried a scent of spices from distant planets, mixed with the clean metallic hum of advanced machines working silently in the background. Music from the Vora, a sound that resembled flowing rivers and chiming stones, filled the chamber, calming nervous hearts. Among the guests were humans. They were not warriors of fame nor kings of systems. They were new, curious explorers who had only recently joined the Galactic Union. Their numbers were small, and their voices still soft in the councils, but their spirit was noted. Among them was Tom, a mechanic by trade. He was not dressed in glowing robes or armored suits like the others. Instead, he wore a simple jacket, plain trousers, and a tool belt strapped around his waist. He was not a delegate nor a nobleman. He was there because the shuttle engines on Valari Prime had needed work, and he had been asked to stay in case anything broke during the grand ceremony. Tom had no high status, no grand family name, yet he stood on the balcony of the hall watching the endless gathering with eyes full of quiet wonder. Tom had seen many things in his short life working across docks and repair bays. He had seen engines melt, storms rip apart trade routes, and smugglers sneak their goods through the cracks of law. But he had never seen so many different kinds of life forms gathered in peace. Tall beings with skin like silver walked side by side with short creatures covered in soft fur. Some spoke in clicking tongues, others in deep bell-like voices. Yet here they all were dressed in their finest, smiling and exchanging greetings as if they were one family. Still, Tom noticed something else. Beneath the smiles and kind words there was tension. The Vora, tall and graceful beings with pale faces and long eyes, stood proudly near the center. Their clothing shimmered like starlight. The Terran, with their bronze skin and broad shoulders, stood opposite them, their garments heavy with symbols of honor and war. Their leaders shook hands for the crowd, but their eyes measured one another as if still testing the weight of old wounds. Tom, being human, had little training in diplomacy, but he was not blind. He could see how fragile the peace truly was. A single spark might be enough to set everything burning again. As the guests filled the seats, a voice rang out through the hall. It belonged to the master of ceremony, a being with a tall crown of feathers and a voice like a rolling drum. He welcomed the crowds and spoke of the history that had led them to this day. He told of battles long past, of treaties broken and restored, of the courage it took for two houses to attempt unity once more. He declared that the wedding of Princess Allura of the Vora and Councillor Darren of the Terran would not only be a binding of two hearts, but also a chain of peace for generations, yet unborn. Applause spread through the hall. Tom clapped too, though part of him remained unsure. He had worked in enough hangars to know that machines only stayed together if every part was tested, tightened, and maintained. A single loose bolt could tear apart an engine in flight. Was this marriage a solid bond, or was it just two cracked pieces forced together? Only time would tell. While the ceremony began to move forward, Tom wandered quietly. Unlike the others, he did not carry the burden of watching every step of the ritual. He explored the side passages, curious as ever. He admired the construction of the hall, noting the joint locks on the steel frames and the smooth way energy flowed through the panels. His hands itched to adjust a few wires that hummed unevenly, but he resisted. This was not his place. Yet his wandering brought him close to the main airlock gate. There he noticed something strange. A group of guards stood tense, whispering among themselves. They checked their rifles again and again, as though expecting trouble. Tom frowned. Weddings were supposed to be peaceful, yet here the guards looked more like soldiers ready for a siege. He returned to the hall unsettled. The music played, the couple prepared to exchange vows, and lights dimmed for the grand moment. Guests leaned forward, waiting to witness history. But Tom could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had grown up on stations where danger often came without warning, and his instincts told him that peace was always most fragile at the moment it seemed strongest. As the bride and groom stepped forward, radiant in their robes, Tom stood at the edge of the hall with his hands resting on his tool belt. He carried no weapon, but his eyes remained sharp. Others focused on the beauty of the union. Tom prepared himself for the unknown, because in his experience, the unknown always arrived when no one was ready. And unknown to everyone in that hall, beyond the glowing walls of Valari Prime, something moved silently in the darkness of space. It was ancient, it was patient, and it had been waiting for this gathering of leaders. With wings folded against its armored body, it drifted closer, unseen by sensors, blinded by the festival lights. Its hunger was endless, and its target was already chosen. But for now, the hall knew nothing of it. The guests clapped, music soared, and peace seemed within reach. Tom, however, felt the faint hum in the walls change, like a warning tremor before a storm. He took a quiet sip from his hidden flask of human brew and muttered to himself, "Let's hope this holds together." The wedding of the age had begun, and the galaxy held its breath. The grand hall of Valari Prime glowed with lights as the bride and groom stood before the gathered crowd. Princess Allura of the Vora shone like silver moonlight, her robe flowing as though woven from starlight itself. Counselor Darren of the Terran stood tall in his bronze garments, the symbols of his people carved into every fold. Their hands reached toward each other as the master of ceremony raised his feathered crown and spoke the words of unity. The air was filled with hope. Delegates leaned forward, waiting to see history written before their eyes. Some smiled, some whispered, and some even wiped tears from their faces. After centuries of rivalry, this wedding promised peace. For the first time in living memory, the two might stand together instead of apart. Tom stood at the edge of the hall, watching carefully. His instincts whispered again that something was wrong. He could not explain it to others. To them, it was only his human nervousness. But to him, it was the same warning that had saved him many times before in the repair docks when engines hummed just before they failed. He felt it in the metal floor beneath his boots, in the subtle tremor of the walls. Something unseen was coming, and then it came. A sudden alarm shattered the music. Red lights flared across the ceiling. The giant doors at the far side of the hall groaned, metal screeching under pressure. Guards rushed to form a line, their rifles raised. The guests gasped, some rising to their feet, others pulling their children close. The master of ceremony froze mid-sentence, his feathers trembling. The doors burst open. Out of the smoke and spark stepped a shape unlike any seen for centuries. It was tall, taller than even the Terran warriors, with wings folded across its back like black blades. Its skin was armored, glistening in the light like dark stone. Its eyes burned red and its teeth shone like sharp metal. A whisper spread through the crowd like a wave. One word, spoken in fear and disbelief. Predator. It was said that the vampire predators had been hunted to extinction long ago, but legends warned that some survived, hiding in the darkest corners of the galaxy. They were not ordinary beasts. They were ancient hunters that fed not only on flesh but on the very life force of living beings. To them, no barrier of power or weapon was enough. They were feared even in stories told to scare children, and now one stood in the Hall of Peace. The predator spread its wings wide, casting a shadow over the shining banners. Its voice was not a sound but a growl that seemed to crawl into the minds of all present. Guests screamed. Nobles stumbled back. Guards fired, their rifles sending beams of blue light across the hall. The beams struck the predator's armor, but they did nothing. The creature moved forward, its wings shielding it like a wall. Every shot ricocheted, lighting the air but failing to harm the beast. Princess Allura was pulled back by her attendants. Counselor Darren drew a ceremonial blade, its edge glowing with Terran fire. He shouted to his warriors to defend the bride. Yet the predator's gaze locked on Allura with hunger. Her life energy, strong and radiant, was what it sought. It had come for her. Panic spread like fire. Delegates ran toward the exits. Some fell. Some pushed each other. The music had turned into chaos. The once proud Hall of Peace now shook with terror. Through it all, Tom did not run. He stood near the corner, gripping the strap of his tool belt. He had no rifle, no shining sword, no armor. All he carried was a few tools, a small torch, and the stubbornness that humans often carried when facing odds too high to count. He watched the predator move forward, and for a moment even he felt his knees shake. But fear did not hold him. Instead, his mind began to work. The predator avoided the high chandeliers as it moved. The sparks of light bothered its eyes, though it tried to ignore them. Tom noticed this detail. He thought of stories from Earth, tales of vampires that could not face sunlight. He wondered if this creature, though alien, shared the same weakness. It was a risk, but risks were something Tom had lived with all his life. Guards fell back, unable to stop the predator. It swept its tail, knocking aside a group of warriors. Blasters clattered to the floor. The creature spread its wings again and let out a roar that shook the glass panels above. Pieces of crystal rained down. Guests ducked under tables. Some fainted from fear. Tom's hand touched the welding torch at his side. He pulled it free, pressed the switch, and the blue flame hissed alive. The sound was small compared to the roars and screams, but in Tom's hand it felt like the only weapon that mattered. He stepped forward. A guard nearby stared at him in shock. "What are you doing, human?" Tom handed the guard his flask of human brew and grinned. "Relax, hold my beer." The guard blinked in confusion, but Tom was already moving. He walked straight toward the predator. The creature paused, surprised to see such a small figure daring to face it. Its red eyes glowed brighter as it leaned closer, as if amused. The crowd, those who still watched, held their breath. What could one human do that an army of guards could not? Tom raised the torch high, the blue flame hissing. He swung it toward the predator's face. The creature flinched, pulling back with a hiss. Its wings folded tight around its body for a moment before spreading again. The sight made Tom's heart pound with new hope. His guess had been right. Light and fire hurt the beast. The predator snarled and struck with its claw. Tom dodged, the swipe missing him by inches. He rolled, came up on his feet, and swung the torch again, keeping the flame close to the creature's armored skin. Sparks flew where the flame touched, and the predator howled. It was not invincible. Gasps filled the hall. The human, the newcomer, the nobody, was standing against the ancient terror, and he was not falling. Still, the predator was far from beaten. It lunged, its wings cutting the air like blades. Tom stumbled back, using tables as cover, striking out with his torch whenever the creature came too close. His arms ached. His breath grew heavy, but his spirit did not bend. He shouted at the engineers hiding behind the pillars. "Cut the lights brighter. Flood this place with power." They hesitated. He shouted again, louder. "Do it now." The engineers scrambled to reroute energy to the hall lights. Panels above flickered, glowing stronger, filling the chamber with harsher beams. The predator screeched, twisting as the brightness struck its wings. Tom pressed forward, torch swinging, light burning from above, and courage filling every step. He was only one man, but he carried something the predator had not expected: the will to fight without fear. The galaxy watched as the human became the line between peace and destruction, and the battle had only just begun. The Hall of Valari Prime was no longer a place of peace. It had turned into a battlefield. Guests who only moments earlier smiled at the sight of a union between two great houses now hid under tables, pressed against walls, or scrambled toward the exits. The predator's roar echoed again and again, shaking the glass beams of the ceiling. Its wings snapped open like massive blades, each movement sending a gust of air across the chamber. Guards lay scattered on the floor, their weapons useless, their courage drained by the sight of the monster. But in the middle of the chaos, one man stood his ground. Tom, the human mechanic, did not wear armor, did not carry plasma weapons, and did not command an army. All he held was a welding torch that hissed with a blue flame. To anyone else it was just a tool, but in his hand it became a weapon, and with it he dared to step forward while others fell back. The predator lowered its head, glaring at him with burning red eyes. It was not used to prey resisting, let alone walking toward it with fire in hand. The creature's armored chest rose and fell as it let out a low growl, the kind of sound that made even brave warriors freeze. But Tom did not stop. He kept moving, his boots striking the floor with steady rhythm, his face calm though his heart thundered in his chest. "Relax," he muttered under his breath, though no one could hear him. "I've handled worse engines than you." The predator lunged, claws slashing at the human. Tom ducked low, the claws slicing the air just above his head. He rolled across the floor, sparks flying from the torch as it scraped against the tiles. The predator whirled, tail snapping like a whip, but Tom slid aside and came up to his feet again. He swung the torch, flame striking close to the predator's arm. The beast pulled back, hissing as the heat licked its skin. A wave of shock ran through the hall. For the first time, the predator had stepped back. For the first time, it had been forced to move away. Delegates and nobles who had been frozen with fear now raised their heads. Whispers filled the air. "The human is fighting it. He made it retreat. How can this be?" The predator's eyes burned brighter, its pride wounded. It spread its wings wide, knocking over the tables and shattering glass ornaments. With a deafening roar, it charged again. Tom braced himself, his grip firm on the torch. He sidestepped as the creature's claws struck, then thrust the flame close to its chest. The predator jerked back, but the fire grazed it, leaving a black mark across the armored plates. The beast howled in fury. Tom's arms trembled with the effort, but he held steady. He remembered the detail he had noticed before. The predator avoided the bright chandeliers and hissed at the sparks. That meant light was its weakness. Fire hurt it and strong light unsettled it. His mind raced. If the engineers could increase the brightness, if the hall could be filled with light, maybe they could weaken the creature enough to stop it. He turned his head toward the side of the chamber, where engineers still crouched behind control panels. "Boost the lights," he shouted. "Give me everything this place can handle." They looked uncertain. One shouted back, "The systems cannot hold that much power." "Do it," Tom roared, his voice carrying across the hall. "Better the lights break than the galaxy burn." The engineers hesitated only for a second before obeying. Their fingers flew across the panels, rerouting power from secondary systems to the hall. The chandeliers above flickered once, twice, then blazed with a sudden surge of energy. The light grew so strong that even the delegates shielded their eyes. The predator screamed, its wings curling around its body as it tried to block the glow. Tom used the moment. He dashed forward, swinging the torch again and again, forcing the beast to step back toward the center of the hall. Each strike of fire made it recoil. Each bright flare made it weaker. But the predator was still powerful. It swung its tail, striking Tom across the chest. The force sent him crashing into a row of fallen chairs. Pain shot through his ribs, but he forced himself up. He coughed, spat to the side, and tightened his grip on the torch. His vision blurred for a moment, but his will was sharp. The predator advanced, sensing weakness. Its claws stretched wide, ready to crush him. The hall held its breath. Would the human fall now? Would this small flicker of courage be extinguished? Tom steadied himself, his legs shaking but unbroken. He raised the torch high, its flame hissing loud in the silence that followed the predator's roar. "Come on then," he said, his voice steady. The predator struck again. Tom rolled, coming up near a broken energy cable that sparked across the floor. He grabbed the cable with his free hand, careful to hold it by the insulation. Electricity cracked at the tip. He glanced up at the nearest chandelier and saw a panel half open above it. An idea sparked in his mind as fast as the lightning in his hand. He jammed the cable into the base of the chandelier. Energy surged, and the light above burst brighter than before, flooding the hall with a blaze of ultraviolet beams. The predator shrieked louder than ever, its wings burning at the edges. It tried to leap away, but Tom swung his torch again, driving it back into the storm of light. Guests who had been hiding began to rise. Warriors who had dropped their weapons now lifted them again, courage returning to their hearts. They saw that the predator could bleed. They saw that it could be hurt. And they saw that one human mechanic, a man with no title, no power, and no armor, was standing against it. Princess Allura, safe behind her guards, whispered to Counselor Darren, "The human fights as if he has nothing to lose." Darren nodded, his eyes fixed on Tom. "Or perhaps he fights because he knows we have everything to lose." The predator thrashed, its tail smashing the floor, its claws raking across the pillars. Dust and debris fell, but Tom kept moving, torch in one hand, sparks of light exploding around him. He was tired, his body ached, and every breath hurt, but he refused to stop. Each time the predator came close, he forced it back with fire. Each time it tried to shield itself, he struck again, driving it toward the center. "More power," he shouted to the engineers. Give me everything." They obeyed, sweat pouring down their faces as they fed more energy into the system. The chandeliers glowed so bright they threatened to shatter, but the light filled every corner of the hall. The predator let out a final roar of rage, blinded and weakened. Still, it did not fall. It crouched low, preparing for a leap. Its wings folded tight, its claws dug into the floor. It was ready to strike with all its might. Tom stood firm, lifting his torch like a sword of flame. He knew he might not survive the next attack. He knew the predator might crush him, but he also knew that if he fell back, the galaxy would lose its chance at peace. And so, even with fear pounding in his chest, he raised his head high and faced the beast head-on. The hall trembled with silence. All eyes watched the human and the predator, locked in the center of the chamber. One man against a nightmare, one flame against the darkness. And as the predator launched itself forward, Tom tightened his grip, ready for the fight that would decide the fate of the wedding, the station, and perhaps the galaxy itself. The Grand Hall of Valari Prime looked more like a battlefield than a place of unity. Broken glass covered the shining floors. Fires burned in corners where fallen lights had sparked. Delegates and nobles crouched behind overturned tables, whispering prayers, while warriors struggled to find courage again. At the center stood Tom, the human mechanic, holding his welding torch like a weapon. His clothes were torn, his face covered in dust, and his ribs hurt from the earlier blow. Yet his eyes burned with steady fire. Across from him, the predator writhed under the light pouring from the broken chandelier. Its wings smoked, its claws twitched, and its red eyes glared with pure hate. The ultraviolet light had cracked parts of its armored skin, revealing raw flesh beneath. It was weakened, but far from defeated. The hall shook with the sound of its roar. The predator spread its wings wide and slammed them against the floor. The force knocked tables aside and sent guards sprawling. The lights above flickered as energy surged through the walls. Tom held his ground. His hands trembled, but his spirit did not. He whispered to himself, not giving up. Not now. The predator lunged forward faster than before. Its claw came down like a blade of black steel. Tom rolled aside, but pain shot through his chest. His body was slower now, every movement heavy. Still, he forced himself to rise. The torch hissed as its flame flared bright. Princess Allura's voice rang out from the far side of the hall. "Do not let him stand alone. If the human can fight, so can we." Her words struck the crowd like a spark in dry wood. Counselor Darren barked an order. "Shields up. Blades forward. Protect the line." Valari guards rushed into position. Terran warriors, their tall bodies built for battle, joined them. Even the smaller delegates found courage. They armed themselves with poles, banners, and whatever they could hold. Together, they formed a ring around the hall, their eyes fixed on the predator. Tom felt strength return as he saw them stand. For the first time since the chaos began, the humans and aliens of many worlds stood as one. The predator noticed too. Its head turned, scanning the growing wall of resistance. It snarled, anger burning hotter. It had come expecting fear, not unity. With a furious cry, it swung its tail across the line of guards. Several fell, shields shattering, but more rushed to fill the gap. Energy beams fired from plasma rifles, striking the predator's body. Some bounced off, but others burned into its cracked skin. The beast roared, shaking the ceiling above. Tom ran forward in the chaos, torch blazing. He leapt onto the fallen pillar, then sprang higher, striking the predator's wing with the flame. The fire hissed against the thin membrane, burning a hole. The predator howled in pain, thrashing wildly, but Tom clung to its wing like a stubborn shadow. "Hold him steady," Tom shouted. Warriors surged forward, spears striking the predator's legs, anchors thrown over its arms. For a moment, the monster was slowed. Tom climbed higher along its wing, holding on with one hand, torch in the other. He struck again, burning deep into the joint. The predator screamed, jerking violently. Tom was thrown hard to the ground. His head rang with pain, but he rolled up, refusing to lie still. The predator limped now, one wing half crippled. But its fury only grew stronger. It swept its claw through the guards, scattering them like leaves. It turned its gaze on Tom again, hatred glowing in its eyes. Princess Allura saw the danger. She broke free from her protectors and ran toward the human. Darren shouted after her, but she did not stop. She reached Tom and helped him to his feet. "You cannot fight alone," she said. Tom's breath came hard, but he grinned faintly. "I was hoping someone would say that." Allura's eyes shone with courage. From her gown, she drew a hidden blade, slender but sharp, a ceremonial weapon of Valari queens. She raised it with steady hands. Together they faced the predator. The beast lunged again, claws reaching for both. Tom thrust his torch upward, forcing the creature's head back, while Allura struck low, slicing across its leg. Black blood hissed where her blade cut. The predator staggered, more wounded than before. Darren led the guards in a charge. Plasma beams, spears, and shields hammered at the predator from all sides. The hall shook with the sound of battle. Tom shouted above the noise. "The lights! Keep them strong!" Engineers scrambled at the panels, rerouting power again and again. The chandeliers blazed so bright that shadows shrank. The predator's movements grew slower, its body trembling under the constant burn of light. But the monster was cunning. With a sudden surge of strength, it slammed its wings against the floor. Dust and smoke filled the hall, blinding the warriors. Then it leapt high, smashing through the shattered roof. Glass and steel rained down as it escaped into the night sky. The battle stopped. The hall fell silent except for the crackle of flames. Everyone looked upward, fear and relief mixing in their hearts. Tom leaned against a broken column, breathing hard. His body ached all over. He knew this was not the end. "It's not gone," he said. "It will come back." Allura stood beside him, her gown torn, her blade dark with blood. "Then we must be ready." Darren joined them, his armor dented but his spirit strong. "The human has shown us how to fight it." "Light, fire, and unity. That is our weapon," Tom nodded. "But it's smart. It won't attack the same way again. It'll strike when we are weak. We need to find its nest, finish this before it finishes us." The council gathered quickly, though their faces were pale with exhaustion. Delegates from many worlds spoke at once, their voices rising in panic. Some wanted to flee, others wanted to hide. But Allura raised her hand and silence fell. She looked across the hall, her voice calm and strong. "This wedding was meant to unite us in peace. Tonight we faced a monster that tried to tear us apart. But we stood together and we survived. If we stay united, we can defeat it. Not just for Valari Prime, but for all our worlds." Her words carried across the chamber. Heads lifted. Shoulders straightened. Fear was still there, but now it was joined by hope. Tom spoke next, his voice rough but steady. "We know its weakness now. Light, fire. Together we can build traps, weapons, defenses. I'm no soldier, but I know machines. Give me tools, give me power, and I'll build something that can burn this thing to ash." Darren looked at him with respect. "Then we fight not as many nations, but as one." The crowd cheered, voices echoing through the broken hall. Yet outside, high above the city of shining towers, the predator circled in the dark sky. Its body burned, its wings torn, but its eyes glowed brighter than ever. It had been challenged, hurt, even forced to flee. But it was not finished. Hunger and fury drove it now. It would strike again, and next time it would not be alone. Tom felt that truth deep in his chest. The fight had only just begun. He turned to Allura and Darren. "We'll need every hand, every tool, every bit of courage we've got. Because the next battle will decide everything." The princess nodded, her blade still in hand. "Then let us prepare." And so among the ruins of the wedding hall, humans and aliens began to plan not for celebration, but for war. The night sky above Valari Prime no longer looked peaceful. The once calm stars were now hidden behind thick clouds, and the great station lights flickered like fading candles. The predator circled high above, wings stretched wide, waiting for the moment to strike again. Inside the damaged wedding hall, survivors worked quickly. Fires were put out, shattered glass swept away, and broken walls reinforced with metal plates. But the wounds of the battle could not be erased so easily. Delegates spoke in hushed tones, guards tightened their grips on weapons, and every eye turned often toward the broken roof where the shadow of the predator had vanished. Tom, bruised but unbroken, sat on a crate while adjusting his welding torch. His hands were steady even though his ribs ached. Around him, engineers brought him wires, energy cells, and broken parts of defense drones. Princess Allura stood nearby speaking with Darren and the council, but her gaze kept drifting toward Tom. She could not hide her respect for the human who had faced the monster without fear. "We cannot wait for it to strike again," Darren said firmly to the council. "It will come back stronger, and this time it may not come alone." Allura nodded. "We must hunt it before it hunts us." Some delegates shook their heads. One shouted, "It is madness to go after it. Better to seal the station, call for fleets, and wait." But Tom stood, cutting into the argument with his rough voice. "Wait, and we give it time to heal. Wait, and it will learn our weakness. No fleet will arrive fast enough. We have to end this here and now. His words carried weight because he had faced the creature with his own hands. The hall fell silent. At last, Allura spoke. Then we prepare a final strike. That decision changed everything. The hall no longer felt like a ruin, but like a war room. Engineers built lamps powered with ultraviolet cores. Guards tested new plasma rifles set to higher frequencies. Delegates lent their ships, drones, and supplies. And Tom, with his human knowledge of simple machines, began designing traps. He explained his plan in plain words. The Predator is fast, but it hates the light. We'll build towers with bright cores, a circle of fire and light that will trap it. Once it's inside, we pour everything we've got on it until nothing remains. Darren added his strategy. We will lure it with a bait it cannot resist. It came for the princess once. It will come again. At those words, Allura straightened her shoulders. Her face was calm, though danger lay in the plan. Then I will be the bait, she said without hesitation. The council erupted in protest, but Allura silenced them with a raised hand. I will not hide while others risk their lives. My life was already meant to unite two great houses. If my courage can unite us against this monster, then it is my duty. Tom looked at her with admiration. He knew her bravery was no less than his own. He nodded. We'll keep you safe. That's a promise. Preparations went through the night. Humans and aliens worked side by side. The wedding hall was abandoned, and instead they chose the great landing field outside the station, a wide open space where the trap could be built. Towers rose, glowing with ultraviolet energy. Plasma turrets lined the perimeter. Engineers rigged drones to carry smaller light bombs. At the center stood a tall platform where Allura would stand, visible to the sky. Tom climbed each tower himself, checking wires, adjusting lamps, and welding supports. His hands moved quickly, his mind sharp. Others asked why he did not rest, but he only answered, I'll rest when it's over. By dawn, the trap was ready. The sky still carried shadows, but the towers glowed bright, humming with power. The warriors of many races stood in formation. Their armor shone, their weapons primed. The air was tense, heavy with silence. Allura climbed the central platform, her gown replaced with light armor, her ceremonial blade at her side. She looked down at Tom, who stood near the controls. Their eyes met, and she gave him a nod of trust. The bait was set. Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. Then, as the second sun of Valari rose, the sky darkened again. The Predator returned. Its wings stretched across the horizon, and its roar shook the towers. But this time it was not alone. Two smaller shapes followed, their bodies slimmer but just as fierce. The Predator had brought its kin. Gasps filled the ranks. Darren raised his voice. Hold the line. Do not break. Tom's heart raced, but he forced his hand steady. 3 of them, he muttered. All right. Then 3 will fall. The great Predator swooped low, its eyes locked on Allura. The smaller beast spread wide, trying to strike from the sides. The trap was tested at once. Tom pulled the lever. The towers blazed, flooding the field with pure ultraviolet light. The air itself seemed to burn. The beast screamed, wings thrashing as the glow struck them. They tried to pull back, but the circle closed too fast. They were trapped. Plasma fire roared from the turrets. Beams struck the sky, burning holes into dark wings. The smaller predators screeched as drones dropped bombs of light upon them. Warriors cheered, fighting with hope. The great predator, however, did not yield. It dove through the storm of fire, claws reaching for the platform. Tom ran forward, climbing the steps as fast as he could. He reached Allura just as the predator's shadow covered them both. Stay behind me, Tom said, though he knew she would not. The predator struck. Tom lit his welding torch, flame bursting bright, and thrust it upward into the monster's mouth. The beast screamed and pulled back, but Allura struck too, her blade slashing across its eye. Black blood sprayed, and the predator roared in fury. The smaller beast broke through the drones, diving at the towers. One tower fell with a crash, its light dying. The circle flickered. Warriors shouted in fear as shadows returned. Tom shouted, "Keep them lit. Don't let the circle fall." Engineers ran to repair. Guards formed shields around the towers, and plasma beams rained on the smaller predators. One was struck through the chest, its body falling like a burning comet. The second slammed into the ground, tearing through soldiers, but Darren himself charged, spear glowing, and drove it deep into the creature's throat. The beast collapsed with a final hiss. Now only the great predator remained. It fought with fury, wings tearing through towers, claws smashing turrets. But the light still burned and wounds covered its body. Tom and Allura stood together at the platform's edge, faces lit by fire and glow. "This ends now," Tom said. He leapt forward, grabbing onto the predator's arm. The creature shook violently, but Tom held fast, climbing with stubborn strength. He reached its back, pulled a light bomb from his belt, and jammed it deep into a crack in its armored skin. The predator shrieked, twisting in the air. Tom leapt clear, hitting the ground hard. Pain shot through him, but he forced himself up. The bomb exploded. A storm of ultraviolet fire burst from inside the beast. Its wings shredded, its body cracked, and its roar turned into a final scream that shook the sky. The predator collapsed, crashing into the field with a thunder that split the ground. Silence followed. Smoke rose, light flickered, and then nothing moved. The predator was gone. Tom limped to his feet, wiping dust from his face. His torch was broken, his clothes torn, but his spirit was unbroken. He looked around at the warriors, the council, the princess. All eyes were on him. He picked up a mug from the supply crate, lifted it, and said with a grin, "Relax. Told you I had it." The field erupted in laughter and cheers. The sound carried across the city, across the station, across every broadcast. For the first time in living memory, many worlds cheered as one. Later, when the council met again, they did not argue as before. They spoke with unity. They declared that the humans were no longer newcomers. They were brothers and sisters of the stars, a people who stood when all others fell. Princess Allura placed her hand on Tom's shoulder. "Today you saved not just me, but all of us. Your courage will be remembered in every world." Tom smiled, tired but proud. "Just doing my job." And so the story spread from Valari Prime to the farthest colonies. The tale of the human who faced the predator with nothing but fire, wit, and stubborn bravery. The tale of the mechanic who reminded the galaxy that sometimes the smallest voice could roar the loudest. It became more than a wedding story. It became a legend. The legend of the human who said, "Relax, hold my beer,"